My name is John Fletcher, and I want to share something extraordinary that happened to my 10-year-old daughter, Emily. Emily is like any other child her age, full of life, creativity, and a love for the simple joys of childhood. She spends her days painting colorful landscapes, singing along to her favorite worship songs, and finding new ways to make us laugh. Her favorite bands are Elevation Worship and Need to Breathe, and you can almost always hear their music playing in the background of our home. She's homeschooled, so we spend a lot of time together as a family. Emily's days are filled with art projects, Bible lessons, and playing in the backyard with our dog Toby. There's nothing about her that you'd think would point to something like prophetic visions. No unusual behavior, no signs of a special gift for dreams. She's just a happy, normal kid, but 6 months ago something began happening that I still struggle to fully understand. Emily started having a series of recurring dreams, 6 times in a row. At first, we brushed them off as nothing more than a child's imagination. But as the dreams continued and their details grew more vivid and intense, it became clear that this wasn't ordinary. What she described to us was profound, unsettling, and undeniably spiritual. It was as if God had chosen her, my little 10-year-old daughter, to see things that most of us could never imagine. As her father, it's hard to explain the mix of emotions I felt: pride, fear, and awe all at once. I knew Emily's dreams weren't just meant for her. They were a message, a warning, and I feel an undeniable responsibility to share her story with you. Emily first came to me about her dream one morning, her face pale and her eyes filled with something I'd never seen before, fear that ran deeper than a child's usual nightmare. She described being in the middle of a massive crowd, surrounded by thousands of people. There was a sense of excitement in the air, a celebration unlike anything she'd ever seen before. People were cheering, waving flags, and crying tears of joy. At the center of it all was a man. Emily said he looked kind, almost like a grandfather, someone you'd naturally trust without a second thought. He wore white, and his presence radiated warmth and reassurance. Everyone seemed drawn to him, like moths to a flame. At first, she thought he was someone good, someone worth celebrating. But then, something changed. As Emily watched from the crowd, the man's kind demeanor began to shift. His smile stayed, but it no longer felt comforting. It felt unnatural, like it was masking something sinister. And then his eyes. She described them turning pitch black, as if they were voids where light could no longer exist. A chill ran down her spine as his presence grew heavier, darker. His voice, which had been calm and reassuring, suddenly became deep and commanding, booming over the crowd like thunder. "I am your shepherd," he declared. In that moment, the entire crowd fell silent. The cheering, the laughter, the joy, it all stopped. Everyone bowed before him in unison, their heads low, as if under a spell. Emily said the silence was deafening. She felt frozen in place, unable to move or look away. Suddenly, the ground beneath the man began to shake. An earthquake erupted, cracking the earth wide open at his feet. Flames shot upward, licking the air around him, but he remained completely untouched. Emily said he just stood there smiling, as if he was in control of the chaos. The fire and destruction didn't faze him. It seemed to fuel him. And then he started walking toward her. She could feel his presence growing stronger with each step, overwhelming her with a sense of dread she couldn't escape. He got closer and closer, his black eyes locked on hers. And just as he reached out to touch her, she woke up. Emily shot up in bed screaming, her heart racing. It wasn't just a bad dream. She was convinced it was something more. The next morning, I found her sitting on the couch, still shaken. She told me about the dream, and I tried to comfort her. "It's just a nightmare," I said. "Dreams can't hurt you." But as the day went on, something happened that neither of us could explain. Emily was scrolling through her tablet when she froze. She stared at the screen for a moment, then turned to me, her face pale. "Dad," she whispered, pointing at a picture. "That's him." I walked over to see what she was looking at, and my stomach dropped. It was a photo of the Pope. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but the way she said it, the certainty in her voice, it sent chills down my spine. At that moment, I realized that whatever Emily had seen in her dream wasn't just a product of her imagination. It was something far deeper, far more profound. The following night, Emily had another dream. This one even more vivid and haunting than the first. She came to me the next morning, her face pale, and said, "Dad, it happened again." This time, she found herself inside a massive cathedral. She described it as the most beautiful place she'd ever seen. Golden light streamed through intricate stained glass windows, casting colorful patterns on the polished floors. The ceilings seemed to stretch endlessly into the heavens, adorned with ornate carvings and shimmering gold accents. At first, the atmosphere felt holy and reverent, like a place where God's presence might dwell. But as Emily stood there, taking in the beauty around her, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. Something wasn't right. The cathedral was filled with people, all kneeling in perfect unison. At first glance, it seemed like a normal congregation at worship. But when Emily looked closer, she noticed something chilling. The worshippers' faces were blank, devoid of any emotion or individuality. Their eyes stared ahead, empty and lifeless, as if they were under some kind of spell. They didn't move, didn't speak, didn't even seem to breathe. At the front of the cathedral, standing at the altar, was the same man from her first dream. Emily recognized him immediately. His white robes, his commanding presence, his aura of both authority and danger. But this time, he wasn't speaking to a crowd. He was leading them in what looked like worship. His voice echoed through the cathedral, deep and resonant, filling the vast space. But instead of feeling comforted or inspired, Emily felt a growing sense of dread. The man's presence wasn't holy, it was sinister. He wasn't leading these people to God, he was leading them away. As Emily stood frozen, watching the lifeless congregation bow in unison, something began to happen. The walls of the cathedral, so grand and majestic, began to crack. At first it was subtle, a faint line running down one of the ornate columns. But soon, the cracks spread, crawling across the walls like veins. Through the cracks, Emily could see darkness. It wasn't just an absence of light, it was a void, an all-consuming blackness that seemed alive, reaching out to devour everything around it. The golden light that had filled the cathedral began to fade, swallowed by the encroaching darkness. Emily's heart raced as she realized that the beauty of the cathedral was just a facade, hiding something far more sinister. Despite the chaos, the man at the altar remained completely unfazed. He continued to lead the congregation, his voice unwavering, as if he was in control of it all. Emily wanted to run, to scream, to warn the people around her. But they didn't move. They didn't react. It was as if they couldn't see the darkness consuming them. And then Emily woke up, her chest heaving and her heart pounding. She came to me that morning with a look I'll never forget. She was scared but determined, as if she knew these dreams weren't just for her. They were a warning. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "Something is wrong. I don't know what it means, but it's like I'm supposed to tell someone." Hearing her recount the dream sent chills down my spine. The imagery, the emotions, the message. It was all too vivid, too purposeful, to be dismissed as just another nightmare. I began to realize that whatever Emily was experiencing wasn't random. It was deliberate, and it carried a message we couldn't ignore. By the third night, Emily was afraid to go to sleep. She told me she didn't want to dream anymore, that it was too much for her to handle. But sleep eventually came, and so did another vision. This time, Emily said she found herself standing in the middle of total chaos. Everywhere she looked, the earth was in turmoil. The ground beneath her feet shook violently as earthquakes split the land apart, swallowing buildings and roads in their wake. Towering waves crashed against the shorelines, flooding cities and wiping entire neighborhoods off the map. Massive storms roared across the skies, darkening the world with their fury. Thunder boomed and lightning cracked the heavens, setting the horizon ablaze. Fires raged through forests and towns, leaving trails of destruction and ash. Emily described the scene as both terrifying and heartbreaking. Cities she recognized were left in ruins, their landmarks crumbled and lifeless. People were running in every direction, screaming, crying, searching for safety. But there was nowhere to go. She said it felt like the end of the world. Amidst the chaos, the man from her previous dreams appeared again. This time, he stood before the masses, his voice booming over the destruction like a beacon. Despite the panic and devastation, his presence seemed to command attention. People stopped running and turned to him, their faces filled with desperation and hope. He raised his hands and spoke with an authority that made the earth itself seem to still. "Come to me," he said. "I will give you peace. I will give you safety. I will give you everything you need, if you follow me." Emily said his words had a strange magnetic pull. The people around her began to flock to him, pushing past one another to get closer, their eyes filled with longing. It was as if they believed he was their savior, the answer to all their problems. But Emily could see the truth. She said his voice, while soothing on the surface, carried an undercurrent of darkness. His promises were laced with deception, and his smile hid something far more sinister. As Emily watched, the man began offering people a mark, a small symbol on their foreheads or hands. At first, she didn't understand what it was for, but then she saw what happened to those who received it. With the mark, people were granted access to food, shelter, and safety. The resources they so desperately needed were suddenly within reach. But the mark came at a cost. Emily described how those who accepted it seemed to change. Their faces, once filled with fear, became blank and emotionless, just like the worshippers in the cathedral from her second dream. It was as if the mark didn't just grant them access to resources, it bound them to the man's control. Those who refused the mark, however, were cast out. They were shunned by the crowd, left to wander alone in the midst of the destruction. Emily saw their pain and struggle, but she also saw something else: determination. They were scared, she said, but they still had their hearts. They still looked alive. As the dream continued, Emily felt the weight of what she was seeing. The people who accepted the mark were giving away more than their freedom. They were giving away their souls. When Emily woke up, she was trembling. She ran to me and told me everything, tears streaming down her face. "Dad," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It felt so real, like it's going to happen. Hearing her describe the dream left me shaken. The destruction, the false promises, the mark. It all felt too specific, too vivid, to be dismissed as just another nightmare. I didn't know what to say to her. All I could do was hold her and pray for guidance. Deep down, I knew these dreams weren't just for Emily. They were a warning, a glimpse of what's to come. Over the next several nights, Emily's dreams continued. Each one was a variation of the same themes: chaos, deception, and a world teetering on the edge of destruction. But with every new dream, the details became sharper, the emotions more overwhelming, and the message more urgent. She described the vividness as something beyond normal dreams. It felt real, as if she were actually living through these events. Emily began to sense that these dreams weren't random. She told me one morning, her voice trembling, "Dad, I think I'm supposed to see this. I think I'm supposed to tell people what's coming." Her words left me speechless. How could a 10-year-old carry the weight of something so profound? And yet, there was no doubt in my mind that Emily was right. These visions weren't just for her. They were a warning, a call for all of us to wake up, to prepare, and to turn our hearts back to God before it's too late. If Emily's story has touched you, I urge you to take it seriously. These dreams are not just her experiences. They are a wake-up call for all of us. Reflect on your life. Are you ready for what's to come? Are you grounded in your faith? Are you prepared to stand firm when deception comes your way? Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more testimonies like this. Share this message with someone who needs to hear it. It might be the warning that changes their life. Together, let's stay vigilant, stay prayerful, and draw closer to God as we navigate these challenging times. Thank you for watching, and may God bless you and your family.